She lived in a quiet town, a place where everyone knew each other's names and daily routines moved slowly, like the gentle current of a small river. She had grown up surrounded by the ordinary sights and sounds of her neighborhood, children playing in the streets, shopkeepers calling out their daily greetings, and the distant ringing of the church bell marking the hours. From the outside, her life looked simple, almost unremarkable. Yet inside her, there was a world of music that no one could see. From the time she could reach the piano keys, she felt an invisible connection to the instrument. Her fingers moved almost instinctively, finding patterns and melodies that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her. Her parents had always noticed her love for music, but they never imagined she would become someone capable of astonishing the world. They supported her as best as they could, buying an old, slightly worn piano from a second-hand store when she was still young. It wasn't much, but to her, it was the gateway to another world. Every evening after school, she would sit by the piano, sometimes for hours, losing herself in the sound of the keys. Her neighbors often heard music drifting from her window. Simple tunes at first, clumsy and uncertain. But over the years, her skill grew in leaps and bounds. She didn't play for attention or recognition. She played because it was a part of her, something that gave her joy and comfort in ways words never could. School life was ordinary, sometimes even difficult. She wasn't the most outgoing student, and many of her classmates overlooked her, thinking of her as quiet and reserved. She didn't mind. Her music was her world, and it filled her in ways the outside world never could. Still, she dreamed quietly, imagining what it would be like to share her music with others, to see the faces of strangers moved by the notes she played. But those were just dreams, fleeting thoughts she tucked away when the bell rang and reality returned. One day, a letter arrived at her home, announcing a local music recital at the town hall. It wasn't a grand event, just a small gathering of local performers. But for her, it felt like a chance to step outside the safe cocoon of her room. She hesitated when she read it. Would she be nervous? Would the other performers laugh at her? She was aware that she was inexperienced in public performances, and the thought of standing in front of strangers made her stomach twist. But something inside her whispered that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, even if it was small. Her parents encouraged her gently. They reminded her that music wasn't about competing with anyone else. It was about sharing something beautiful. They spoke with pride in their voices, words that gave her courage she didn't know she had. She agreed to perform, choosing a piece that was both simple and heartfelt, something she could play with all the emotion she carried inside. The day of the recital arrived. She woke early, nerves fluttering in her chest like birds trapped in a cage. She wore a modest dress, her hair tied back simply. Nothing about her appearance suggested that she was about to create a moment that no one in the hall would forget. The town hall was small but filled with people who had come to see friends and family perform. The air buzzed with conversation and laughter, the sound bouncing off the high ceilings. Backstage, she watched the other performers, their confidence shining like a bright light. Some of them had trained for years in formal music schools, their hands steady, their postures perfect. She felt a pang of doubt. How could she, a quiet girl from a small town with only an old second-hand piano at home, compare to these polished musicians? Her fingers itched to play, but her heart thumped with uncertainty. Then she noticed him. He was a guest performer, someone whose name had been whispered with awe in music circles. He carried himself with an air of certainty that could fill a room even before he touched a key. People were already whispering about his past performances, about how no one had ever outshone him. She watched from a distance as he smiled confidently, seemingly aware that all eyes were on him. And then, to her surprise, she heard a soft laugh escape his lips as he glanced in her direction. She didn't know if he had meant it as a joke, or if it was just a quiet chuckle, but it made her stomach twist. He laughed at her, or so it seemed. She could feel the eyes of some people in the room flicking toward her, curious, waiting for a reaction. Her fingers itched to respond, not with words but with music. She reminded herself why she had come here. Not for recognition, not for applause, but for the simple joy of sharing what was inside her heart. She took a deep breath, letting the nervousness settle into a calm determination. This was her moment, even if it was just one note at first. As she approached the piano, she noticed the hall falling slightly quiet. Conversations died down as people noticed a new performer taking her place. Her hands hovered over the keys for a moment, almost reverently. She closed her eyes and remembered the countless evenings spent alone with the piano, the hours of practice, the moments of frustration, and the moments of triumph when a melody came together perfectly. She remembered how music had been her companion, her friend, and her secret refuge. All of that came rushing back, filling her with a quiet strength. She pressed a single key. The sound was simple, yet it carried an unexpected depth, a clarity that seemed to resonate with every person in the hall. The laughter she had imagined, the judgment she had feared, all vanished. For a moment, there was only the music, a pure connection between her and everyone listening. Time seemed to slow as the note lingered, echoing softly against the walls. She played another, and another, each note carefully chosen, each movement filled with intention. The piece she had practiced for months unfolded seamlessly, telling a story without words. She didn't need to see the faces in the audience to know they were captivated. She felt it in the stillness of the air, in the way the hall seemed to hold its breath, in the collective pause that made every sound she played even more powerful. Somewhere in the crowd, the famous pianist watched, his confident expression faltering. He had expected an amusing little performance, perhaps a mistake that would confirm his superiority. Instead, he saw a young woman, unknown to the wider world, commanding the room with nothing but the music she had created from her heart. His laughter had disappeared, replaced with something closer to awe, a recognition that talent sometimes comes from the most unexpected places. The piece ended, but the moment didn't. Silence hung in the air for a heartbeat, a suspended pause before the hall erupted with applause. People clapped, cheered, and some even stood, moved by what they had just witnessed. She opened her eyes, and for the first time that day, she saw the effect her music had on the audience. Faces filled with surprise, admiration, and respect stared back at her. She smiled softly, a mix of relief and joy washing over her. Backstage, she realized that this was more than just a performance. It was the first step into a world she had only dreamed about. She had faced doubt, nerves, and even ridicule, and had turned it all into something beautiful. In that moment, she understood that music was more than just notes and rhythms. It was a language that could bridge gaps, change perceptions, and touch hearts in ways nothing else could. She left the stage that day not as a shy girl who had quietly practiced alone, but as a musician whose talent could no longer be ignored. The laughter, the doubts, and the fears had all been replaced by something far more powerful. Recognition, validation, and the beginning of a journey that would take her far beyond the walls of the small town hall. Even as the audience slowly filed out, talking excitedly about the performance they had just seen, she remained near the piano, quietly savoring the echoes of her music. She knew this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more skeptics, and more moments that would test her resolve. But for now, she allowed herself to feel proud, to feel the joy of having shared a piece of herself with the world, and to understand that sometimes, even the smallest note can make a hall of people stop, listen, and simply feel awe. And somewhere in the back of the hall, he watched her quietly, the confidence he had carried all evening replaced with a newfound respect. For the first time, he realized that talent cannot be judged by appearances, and that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most unassuming people. The young woman had done more than play a piece of music. She had made a statement that could never be unheard, and that moment would stay with everyone present for a long time. The day after the recital, she woke up feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The memory of the applause still lingered in her mind, like a melody that refused to fade. People in the town were talking about her performance, though most had never imagined someone so quiet and unassuming could play with such emotion and skill. She walked through the streets, hearing whispers and seeing small smiles from neighbors who had attended the recital. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, the quiet thrill of being noticed, of being recognized. She knew that this recognition was just the beginning. Her heart still carried a hint of doubt, the same doubt that had sat with her backstage. Could this moment truly lead anywhere? Or was it just a fleeting spark, a single bright note in an otherwise ordinary life? She tried not to dwell on these thoughts as she prepared for another practice session. The piano waited for her at home, its familiar presence both comforting and demanding. Every key held a memory, every melody a story she had yet to fully tell. Meanwhile, the famous pianist who had laughed at her continued his travels, performing in different cities and being celebrated for his skills. But that night, when he returned to his hotel, he couldn't shake the image of her. He kept thinking about the way she had played, how even a single note could captivate an entire hall. He had always been confident in his talent, but for the first time, he wondered if he had underestimated someone simply because she didn't look like a typical performer. Word of her performance began to spread beyond the town. A small music magazine ran a short piece about the recital, mentioning the quiet young woman whose piano playing had stunned the audience. Emails and calls started coming in from local music teachers and event organizers, expressing interest in hearing more of her music. She felt overwhelmed and unsure, but also a sense of purpose she had never felt before. Her music had found an audience, and now she had to decide what to do with it. Her parents noticed the change in her. She had always been thoughtful, quiet, and reserved, but now there was a spark in her eyes, a new determination that hadn't been there before. They encouraged her to continue practicing, to embrace the opportunities that were slowly opening up. They reminded her that talent alone was never enough. Hard work and dedication were equally important. She nodded, understanding that this was her chance to take her music beyond the small living room where it had always lived. One afternoon, she received an invitation to perform at a small regional music festival. It wasn't a huge event, but it was larger than anything she had experienced before. She felt nervous excitement and a little fear. The thought of facing a new audience, people who didn't know her and wouldn't be predisposed to cheer for her, was intimidating. Yet she also felt a quiet thrill. This was a step forward, a way to test her abilities, and she couldn't resist it. She prepared carefully for the festival, choosing pieces that would show both her technical skill and her emotional depth. She practiced for hours, often losing track of time, her fingers dancing across the keys as if they had a life of their own. Friends and neighbors sometimes stopped by to listen, offering encouragement and support. Their appreciation reminded her that music was more than a personal passion. It could connect people, create moments of shared experience, and evoke emotions that words could not. On the day of the festival, she arrived early, taking in the size of the venue and the energy of the crowd. Performers were rehearsing, organizers were moving busily, and the air was filled with a sense of anticipation. She found her dressing room and sat quietly, letting the sounds of the hall sink in. Her heart raced, but she focused on her breathing, centering herself. She reminded herself that music was her language, and that if she let it speak freely, the audience would understand. Backstage, she could hear the famous pianist performing for the crowd. He was as skilled as everyone said, his hands moving gracefully over the keys, producing complex melodies that drew admiration. She watched from a distance, feeling a mixture of respect and nervousness. The thought that he had laughed at her once crossed her mind, but she quickly pushed it aside. This was her moment, and she would let her music speak for itself. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage, her dress simple, her hair tied back neatly. The audience looked at her with curiosity, some smiling politely, others whispering about the young pianist who had gained attention in a small town. She sat at the piano, letting her hands hover over the keys for a brief moment. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to play. The music flowed naturally, each note precise and full of feeling. The audience grew silent, caught in the spell of her performance. Even those who had never heard of her before were captivated by the depth and clarity of her playing. It was as if the piano had become an extension of her emotions, translating everything she had felt and experienced into sound. The music told a story of hope, struggle, and quiet triumph, resonating deeply with everyone listening. Among the crowd, The famous pianist watched, his previous confidence replaced by curiosity and admiration. He had expected another simple performance, maybe a pleasant but forgettable recital. Instead, he found himself drawn into the music, noticing nuances and expressions that revealed both technical mastery and emotional depth. He realized that her talent was genuine, a rare gift that couldn't be taught or faked. As she played, she felt a sense of connection with the audience that she had never experienced before. Every note seemed to bridge the gap between performer and listener, creating a shared space where emotions could be felt without words. The applause that followed was enthusiastic, heartfelt, and continuous. People rose from their seats, clapping and cheering, moved not just by the music but by the person who had created it. Backstage, she felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. The nervousness that had gripped her earlier was gone, replaced by a deep satisfaction. She had faced a new challenge, and her music had risen to the occasion. Invitations and compliments came quickly, some from organizers who wanted her to perform again, others from music enthusiasts who wanted to learn more about her journey. Over the next few weeks, her life began to change. She was invited to play at local events, small concerts, and even charity functions. Each performance brought new experiences, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow. She learned to handle nerves, to connect with different audiences, and to express herself through music in ways she had never imagined. Her parents continued to support her, proud and amazed at how their quiet daughter was making a mark on the world. The famous pianist reached out to her, inviting her to collaborate on a small project. She was surprised and hesitant at first but eventually agreed. Working with him was both intimidating and inspiring. She saw firsthand the dedication, discipline, and creativity that had made him successful. At the same time, she realized that her own approach, rooted in emotion and personal expression, was equally powerful. Together, they created music that combined technical skill and heartfelt feeling, leaving both of them with a newfound respect for one another. Through all of this, she remained grounded, never forgetting the small town, the old second-hand piano, and the quiet evenings she had spent practicing alone. She knew that talent alone was not enough. It was the passion, dedication, and connection with others that made music truly extraordinary. And so, she continued to play, to grow, and to share her gift with anyone willing to listen. Her journey was only beginning, but already it was clear that the girl who had once been overlooked and underestimated was no longer invisible. She had discovered that her music had the power to move people, to change perceptions, and to create moments that would be remembered long after the notes had faded. And deep inside, she knew that she had only just begun to explore the true potential of her gift. The weeks after the regional music festival were a whirlwind for her. Invitations to perform kept arriving in the mail, along with messages from people who had heard about her remarkable recital. Each request, each new opportunity, brought a mixture of excitement and nerves. She found herself carefully planning each performance, choosing the pieces that would show not just her skill, but the story she wanted to tell through her music. Even as her schedule grew busier, she stayed grounded, remembering the quiet evenings at home when she had first discovered the joy of playing the piano. One evening, she received a letter from a prestigious music academy in the city. They had heard about her performances and wanted her to audition for a scholarship. The thought was thrilling but also intimidating. She had never studied formally in a music school, had no certificates or competitions to her name, just years of practice in a small town and a deep love for music. She spent hours considering whether to accept the challenge. Finally, with encouragement from her parents, she decided to take the leap. This could be the chance to grow even further, to learn from accomplished teachers, and to meet other musicians who shared her passion. The day of the audition arrived. The academy was located in a large, bustling city, full of noise, movement, and unfamiliar faces. She felt small and somewhat out of place among the students and instructors, many of whom had years of formal training and impressive resumes. But as she approached the piano, she reminded herself that this was about her music, her expression, and her love for what she did. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let her hands find the keys. From the first note, the audition panel was captivated. Her performance was not about showing off technical skill alone. It was about storytelling, about emotion, about conveying something real and human through the music. Each note carried a piece of her experience, her dedication, and her journey. The panelists exchanged impressed glances as they listened, clearly moved by the depth and authenticity of her playing. After she finished, the silence in the room was palpable. Then, one by one, the panelists began to applaud. She felt a rush of relief and joy, mixed with disbelief that her music had reached these experienced musicians on such a deep level. They offered constructive feedback, encouraging her to continue developing her skills and expressing her unique voice. The moment reaffirmed something she had always known deep inside. Talent, when nurtured and shared with sincerity, could bridge any gap. Back in her small town, she began to practice even more diligently. She understood that this was only the beginning, that her journey as a musician would require hard work, dedication, and constant growth. But each time she played, she felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond applause or recognition. Her music had the power to touch hearts, and that realization drove her to explore new pieces, new techniques, and new emotions she could convey through the piano. Meanwhile, the famous pianist who had laughed at her continued his tours, performing for large audiences in cities around the country. But he couldn't stop thinking about the young woman who had surprised him that day in the town hall. He remembered how effortlessly she had captured the attention of the entire audience with just a few notes, how her playing had carried an authenticity and depth he rarely encountered. Curiosity and admiration grew within him, and he found himself wondering how she had developed such a natural talent without formal training. Eventually, he reached out to her, inviting her to a small collaborative performance. The idea of working with a well-known pianist both thrilled and intimidated her. She had admired his skill from afar, and now she would have the opportunity to perform alongside him. The meeting was scheduled at a local concert hall, a venue smaller than those he usually performed in, but perfect for the intimate collaboration they were planning. On the day of the rehearsal, she arrived early, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. The hall was quiet, the lights casting a soft glow on the polished wooden floors. She took her seat at the piano, while he approached with a friendly but professional demeanor. There was no arrogance this time, no dismissive laughter. Only mutual respect and a shared focus on the music they were about to create together. As they began to play, something remarkable happened. Their styles, though different, complemented each other perfectly. His precision and technical mastery blended seamlessly with her emotional expressiveness. The music became a conversation between them, a dialogue of notes and rhythms that transcended words. They experimented with different pieces, improvising and adapting, each moment teaching them something new about collaboration and musical interpretation. The rehearsal lasted for hours, but time seemed to stretch and bend as they played. She felt a deep connection to the music and to her collaborator, a sense of unity and understanding that was both exhilarating and humbling. By the end of the session, they had created a set of performances that were technically impressive yet deeply moving. The experience left her inspired and motivated to continue exploring the full potential of her talent. Word of their collaboration spread quickly, attracting attention from local media and music enthusiasts. Invitations to perform at other events followed, offering her more opportunities to showcase her skill and expressiveness. She began to travel more, visiting neighboring towns and cities, performing for audiences who had never imagined that someone from a small, quiet town could possess such extraordinary talent. Through all this, she remained humble and focused. She remembered the quiet evenings spent alone with her old piano, the years of practice that had prepared her for these moments, and the people who had supported and encouraged her along the way. Her journey was not about fame or recognition. It was about sharing her gift, touching hearts, and continuing to grow as a musician and as a person. One evening, after a particularly moving performance at a community concert, she sat backstage, reflecting on how far she had come. The applause and cheers were still echoing in her ears, but she felt a quiet satisfaction that went deeper than any external recognition. She had faced doubt, nervousness, and even ridicule, and had turned those challenges into opportunities to shine. Each performance, each note, was a step forward, a testament to her dedication and passion. The famous pianist watched her from the side of the stage, still amazed by her ability to convey emotion and connect with the audience. He had learned something valuable from their collaboration. Talent could appear anywhere, often in the most unexpected places, and it was impossible to judge a musician solely by appearance or reputation. He felt a deep respect for her, recognizing that her journey was not just about skill but about courage, perseverance, and authenticity. As she packed her belongings and prepared to leave the hall, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead would not always be easy, and there would be moments of doubt and challenge. But she knew now that her music had the power to inspire, to move, and to create lasting impressions. Each performance was a chance to connect with others, to share a piece of herself, and to continue growing as both a musician and a human being. She stepped out into the quiet night, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, and felt a sense of anticipation for the future. There were more stages to play on, more audiences to reach, and more music to discover within herself. And somewhere in the distance, she knew, the man who had once laughed at her piano skills would continue to watch, not with judgment, but with admiration and respect for the young woman who had shown the world what true talent could achieve. Months passed, and her life became a careful balance between practice, performances, and personal growth. Each day began with hours at the piano, her fingers moving with the kind of precision that only comes from years of dedication. She experimented with new pieces, challenging herself with compositions she had once thought too difficult. Her repertoire grew, not just in quantity but in quality, as she learned to infuse emotion into every note she played. She knew that technique alone was not enough. It was the feeling behind each note that truly touched people. The fame she had slowly gained was still modest compared to established performers, but it brought opportunities she had never imagined. Invitations to play at cultural events, charity functions, and even some national music festivals arrived regularly. Each new stage was a test, a chance to prove not only her skill but the authenticity of her music. She carried herself with quiet confidence, understanding that every performance was a moment to connect with her audience and share something beyond words. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a prestigious international music competition. It was an opportunity that could launch her career to a global level, but it also carried immense pressure. The competition would gather the best young pianists from around the world, many with years of formal training and accolades. For a moment, doubt crept into her mind. Could she, someone who had never studied in a conservatory, truly compete with these prodigies? She felt the weight of expectation but reminded herself of the journey that had brought her this far. The long hours at the piano, the small victories, the audience that had once been stunned by her one note. She decided to accept the challenge, knowing that growth often came through facing fear. As the competition approached, she immersed herself in preparation. Every day was a mix of technical drills, memorization, and emotional practice. She studied the works of famous composers, learning to understand the intention behind each phrase and rhythm. She visualized herself performing on the grand stage, imagining the hall filled with listeners who had no idea who she was but would be captivated by her music. Each rehearsal strengthened her confidence and deepened her understanding of the pieces she would perform. Arriving at the competition, she was struck by the sheer scale of the event. The concert hall was enormous, with rows of seats stretching far back and a stage designed for grand performances. Participants from dozens of countries were already preparing, each exuding confidence and experience. She felt small in comparison, but she reminded herself that her strength came from her heart, from the countless hours she had spent perfecting her music, and from the authenticity that had always guided her playing. The day of her performance arrived. Backstage, she waited quietly, listening to the other competitors. Their playing was flawless, technically brilliant, and commanding. For a moment, fear crept in, but she closed her eyes, imagining herself back in the small town hall where it all began. She remembered the first note she had played that had stunned the audience, the applause, the recognition, and the respect she had earned over time. Drawing strength from those memories, she stepped onto the stage with a calm determination. As her fingers touched the keys, a hush fell over the audience. The first note rang out, pure and clear, carrying emotion that seemed to fill the massive hall. Her music was not just about speed or technical skill, it was about story, about connection, about feeling. Each phrase flowed naturally, with crescendos and pauses that made the audience lean forward, hanging on every sound. The competition judges, known for their discerning ears, watched in silence, their expressions revealing a mixture of surprise and admiration. Midway through her performance, she closed her eyes, letting her emotions guide her fingers. Memories of her journey, of the quiet practice sessions, of the laughter that had once mocked her, of the support from family and friends, fueled her playing. The notes became more than sound. They became an expression of her life, her struggles, and her triumphs. The audience was captivated, many holding their breath, completely absorbed in the music she created. When the last note faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then, slowly, applause began to build, growing louder and more enthusiastic. People rose to their feet, cheering, moved not only by the technical brilliance of her performance but by the emotion she had conveyed. The judges nodded appreciatively, and some whispered to each other, clearly impressed. She felt a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. She had faced some of the best young pianists in the world, and her music had spoken to the audience in a profound way. Backstage, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The nerves that had gripped her were gone, replaced by a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew that this was not just about winning a competition. It was about sharing a part of herself with the world. Every performance, every note, was a chance to communicate something real and human, to touch hearts in ways words never could. She felt proud, not because of recognition or applause alone, but because she had stayed true to her music, her journey, and herself. News of her performance spread quickly. Articles in music magazines praised her for both skill and emotional depth. Social media shared videos of her playing, attracting attention from audiences far beyond her small town. She received invitations to perform internationally, to collaborate with renowned musicians, and to teach young aspiring pianists who had heard of her remarkable journey. Each opportunity was a reminder of how far she had come from the quiet, overlooked girl who had once played a single note that stilled an entire hall. Despite the growing attention and opportunities, she remained grounded. She continued her daily practice, finding joy in the music itself rather than in accolades or praise. She remembered the people who had supported her, the moments of doubt she had overcome, and the journey that had shaped her into the musician she had become. Her music was her voice, her way of connecting with others, and she vowed never to lose that connection, no matter how famous or accomplished she became. One evening, after another performance, she sat alone at the piano in her hotel room, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the young girl who had once played for a small audience in a quiet town, and how that moment had set everything in motion. She smiled, realizing that the laughter and doubt she had once faced had only strengthened her resolve. Every challenge, every criticism, had shaped her into the musician she was today. She understood that true success was not measured solely by recognition or awards, but by the ability to stay true to oneself and to share one's gifts with the world. And somewhere in her thoughts, she felt the presence of the famous pianist who had once laughed at her. She imagined him listening to her performance, not with ridicule, but with respect and admiration. That memory reminded her that talent is often hidden in the most unexpected places, and that perseverance, authenticity, and heart could overcome even the harshest judgments. As she prepared to leave the city and return home, she felt a sense of anticipation for the future. There were more stages to play on, more audiences to move, and more music to discover within herself. She knew that her journey was far from over, and each performance was a step toward realizing the full potential of her gift. The quiet girl who had once been overlooked was now a musician who could command attention with the simple power of a note, a melody, and a heart full of passion. Her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. Invitations to perform at concerts, festivals, and charity events came regularly. Each opportunity brought new experiences and challenges, but also a sense of fulfillment that made every long hour of practice worth it. She continued to travel, meeting other musicians, learning new techniques, and sharing her music with audiences who were eager to hear her unique voice. Even as the applause grew louder and the venues bigger, she stayed grounded, remembering the quiet days spent alone at her old piano in the small town where it all began. One day, she was invited to perform at a prestigious international charity gala. The event would be attended by dignitaries, renowned musicians, and a wide audience eager to witness talent from around the world. It was a significant stage, and while she felt nervous, she also felt a deep sense of excitement. This was more than just a performance. It was an opportunity to inspire, to show that passion, perseverance, and authenticity could shine through even in the most formal and intimidating settings. Backstage at the gala, she watched the other performers with curiosity. They were accomplished, polished, and confident, but she reminded herself that her strength lay not in competition but in expression. Music, she knew, was a language that spoke directly to the heart, and she had a story to tell through every note. She took a deep breath, centering herself, and let her fingers hover over the keys, feeling the weight of the moment and the power of her music. As she began to play, a hush fell over the audience. The first note resonated through the grand hall, clear, precise, and full of emotion. Every phrase she played was infused with years of practice, experience, and heartfelt feeling. The audience leaned in, captivated by the depth and authenticity of her performance. Her music told a story that transcended words, a story of struggle, perseverance, and the joy of sharing a gift that had once seemed hidden away. Among the audience, the famous pianist who had once laughed at her watched with quiet admiration. He had followed her journey from that small town hall and had seen her grow into a musician capable of captivating audiences on a grand stage. His earlier laughter had been replaced by deep respect, and he realized that her talent was both rare and genuine. He understood that true artistry comes not just from technical skill but from the ability to move people, to touch hearts in ways that words cannot. The performance continued, each note building on the last, carrying the audience along a journey of emotion and expression. She played with confidence, yet with humility, allowing the music to flow naturally from her hands and heart. The applause that followed was spontaneous and enthusiastic, rising to a thunderous ovation that echoed through the hall. She felt a mixture of relief, joy, and gratitude, knowing that her music had reached people in a profound way. After the performance, she was approached by several renowned musicians and event organizers who praised her skill and expression. They were eager to collaborate, to learn from her, and to support her journey. Each encounter reinforced her belief that music was a universal language, capable of bridging gaps and creating connections that transcended background, culture, and experience. She realized that her journey was no longer just about her own growth. It was about inspiring others, showing that dedication, passion, and authenticity could lead to remarkable achievements. As she continued her travels, she noticed a change within herself. The nervousness and self-doubt that had once accompanied her performances were replaced by a quiet confidence and a deeper understanding of her own abilities. She embraced challenges with curiosity rather than fear, seeing each performance as an opportunity to connect, to grow, and to share her story. The joy of playing, which had first drawn her to the piano, remained at the heart of everything she did, guiding her through each new experience. One evening, after a performance at a cultural festival, she sat backstage reflecting on her journey. She thought about the quiet girl who had once played a single note in a small hall, stunning an audience and changing the course of her life. The memory of that moment, and the people who had believed in her along the way, reminded her of the power of perseverance and authenticity. She understood that her success was not simply about talent. It was about dedication, heart, and the courage to keep playing even when others doubted her. The famous pianist reached out to her again, proposing a collaborative concert tour. This was an opportunity to combine their talents, to create music that was both technically brilliant and emotionally moving. She agreed, seeing it as a chance to learn, grow, and reach new audiences. Their rehearsals were intense but inspiring, each session revealing new ways to express emotion and connect with listeners. The collaboration pushed her boundaries and strengthened her skills, while also deepening her understanding of music as a form of communication and storytelling. As the tour progressed, their performances received widespread acclaim. Audiences were captivated by the harmony between technical mastery and emotional depth, the dialogue between two musicians who understood each other through the language of music. Critics praised her for her unique voice and the authenticity of her expression, noting that her journey from a quiet town to international stages was a testament to the power of perseverance and passion. She felt proud, not because of recognition or accolades, but because she had stayed true to herself and her music. During this time, she also took opportunities to mentor young musicians. She visited schools, music academies, and community centers, sharing her experiences and encouraging others to pursue their passions. She emphasized the importance of dedication, practice, and authenticity, reminding them that talent is just the beginning. What matters most is the heart and effort put into one's craft. Seeing young students inspired by her journey brought her a sense of fulfillment that was as powerful as the applause she received on stage. One particularly memorable evening, she returned to the town hall where her journey had begun. The hall was filled with familiar faces and new admirers, all eager to hear the musician who had once played a single note that stilled the audience in awe. As she sat at the piano and began to play, she felt a profound connection to her past and present, to the people who had supported her and to the young girl she had once been. The music flowed effortlessly, each note carrying the story of her journey, the struggles, the triumphs, and the joy of sharing her gift with the world. The audience was captivated, just as they had been years ago, and the applause was heartfelt and enthusiastic. In that moment, she understood the true impact of her music. Not just the recognition, not just the accolades, but the ability to inspire, to move, and to connect with people on a deep and emotional level. She realized that her journey was ongoing, that there were always new pieces to explore, new audiences to reach, and new experiences to be had. As she left the stage that evening, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had come far from the quiet girl in a small town, yet she remained grounded, aware of the effort, dedication, and passion that had carried her to this point. She understood that music was not just about skill or fame. It was about sharing a piece of oneself, touching lives, and creating moments that would linger in the hearts of listeners long after the last note had faded. And she knew that her journey, though already remarkable, was only just beginning. Her journey had reached a point that she had once only dreamed of. From playing quietly in her small town to performing on international stages, every step had been filled with dedication, challenges, and moments of wonder. Yet, even as she experienced success and recognition, she remained true to the essence of her music, the joy of creating something beautiful and sharing it with others. She understood that the applause and accolades were fleeting, but the connection between her music and the hearts of her audience was lasting and profound. One morning, she received an invitation to perform at a world-renowned concert hall in a major city. It was the kind of venue that musicians dream of, with a history of legendary performances and an audience that expected nothing less than brilliance. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves, knowing that this performance would be watched by critics, enthusiasts, and fellow musicians from around the world. But she reminded herself that the stage was not a place to prove herself to others. It was a place to express her music, to share her journey, and to touch lives through her notes. Backstage, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the countless hours spent practicing, the small victories and setbacks, the moments of doubt, and the people who had encouraged her along the way. She thought about the famous pianist who had once laughed at her, and how that moment had fueled her determination. She understood that every challenge she had faced had been a lesson, shaping her into the musician she had become. The weight of expectation was heavy, but it was also a reminder of how far she had come. When she stepped onto the stage, the hall was filled with anticipation. The audience was silent, waiting for the first note to fill the grand space. She sat at the piano, taking a deep breath, and let her fingers find the keys. The music began, soft at first, gradually building in intensity and emotion. Each note carried her experiences, her passion, and her heart. The audience was captivated, leaning forward as if trying to catch every nuance of her performance. Her music told a story that transcended language and culture. It spoke of perseverance, of hope, of quiet strength emerging from challenges, and of the beauty found in simplicity. She played with an authenticity that no amount of formal training could teach, a raw emotion that resonated with everyone listening. Critics, musicians, and spectators alike were drawn into the narrative she created through sound, experiencing the journey she had traveled in every phrase and chord. Midway through her performance, she closed her eyes, allowing herself to be fully immersed in the music. Memories of her early days, the worn second-hand piano, the quiet practice sessions, the small town hall, flowed through her mind. She felt a profound connection to those moments, realizing that they were the foundation of her artistry. Every note she played was a tribute to that journey, a recognition of how far she had come and the experiences that had shaped her. The famous pianist watched from the side of the stage, his admiration evident. He had seen her growth, her dedication, and her ability to move audiences in ways that were both technical and deeply emotional. He understood that her talent was extraordinary not because it was flawless, but because it was authentic, heartfelt, and powerful. He had once doubted her, but now he saw the true depth of her gift and the impact it had on everyone who heard her play. As the final notes resonated through the hall, there was a moment of silence, as if the audience itself was holding its breath. Then, applause erupted, filling the space with energy and excitement. People stood, cheering and clapping, many with tears in their eyes. She felt a wave of gratitude and joy, knowing that her music had touched them deeply. It was a reminder that the power of music lay not in fame or recognition, but in the ability to connect, to inspire, and to create shared moments of beauty. After the performance, she was approached by musicians, critics, and fans, all expressing admiration and respect. Invitations to collaborate, perform, and teach arrived, each offering new opportunities to grow and share her gift. She accepted these with humility, recognizing that her journey was ongoing, and that each experience was a chance to continue learning and evolving as a musician. She also took time to mentor young pianists, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to follow their passion with dedication and authenticity. She emphasized that talent alone was not enough, that perseverance, emotional connection, and a genuine love for music were what truly made a performer remarkable. Seeing her students inspired and motivated brought her a sense of fulfillment that rivaled the applause of any audience. Over the years, she continued to perform, travel, and inspire, each stage and audience adding new layers to her story. She remained grounded, never forgetting the quiet beginnings that had nurtured her talent and shaped her character. She understood that true success was measured not only by recognition but by the ability to remain true to oneself, to create art that resonates, and to touch lives in meaningful ways. One evening, she returned to the small town where it all began. The old piano still stood in her home, worn but sturdy, a symbol of her journey. She sat before it, fingers hovering over the keys, and played. The music was simple, intimate, and heartfelt, a reminder of why she had fallen in love with the piano in the first place. It was not about audiences or accolades, but about connection, expression, and the joy of creating something beautiful. As she played, she thought about the moments that had defined her path, the doubts, the laughter, the challenges, and the triumphs. She realized that every step, every note, had led her to this point, shaping her not only as a musician but as a person. Her journey was a testament to perseverance, authenticity, and the enduring power of passion. She knew that while performances would continue and audiences would grow, the true essence of her music would always come from the heart, and that was something no stage or hall could ever take away. Her story became an inspiration to many. People from different parts of the world heard about the quiet girl whose single note once stilled a hall, and they were moved by her dedication, humility, and artistry. She showed that talent could emerge from the most unexpected places, that obstacles could be transformed into opportunities, and that authenticity was more powerful than any applause or recognition. Her journey was proof that a single note, played with sincerity, could change perceptions, inspire hearts, and create moments that linger forever. As she looked forward to the future, she felt a sense of excitement and peace. There would always be new challenges, new stages, and new audiences, but she was ready to face them with the same dedication, passion, and authenticity that had carried her from the quiet streets of her small town to the grandest concert halls in the world. And in every performance, she would continue to share not just music, but a piece of herself, leaving the audience not only entertained but inspired, moved, and in awe of the quiet strength and beauty that had always been within her.